Hi there, everyone. My name is Nick Myers, and I am the founder and CEO of Red Fox AI, based in Madison, Wisconsin. And at Red Fox AI, we help give brands a voice by leveraging the power of artificial intelligence and voice assistant technology. I am incredibly excited to be attending Social Media Strategy Summit Chicago again for the third year in a row. It's by far one of my favorite events of the year, albeit this year we're doing it through the power of the internet and through virtual means, but still incredibly grateful and excited to be here to be able to talk with you all about voice assistant technology and some of the opportunities that you need to start paying attention to. I've given talks about voice pretty consistently over the last couple of years, but as we now head into the 2020s, the new decade, and a post-pandemic world, there's really some things that you need to start paying attention to because this technology is not going anywhere anytime soon, and the pace of technology is going to increase 100x as we head into the next few years. So now is a really good time to start thinking about voice as a way for you to engage your customers as well as reduce costs and increase revenue. So today's talk, I'm going to dive into a marketer's guide to voice in 2020. So let's kick it off here by just talking a bit about Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, and Bixby. These are four names that we've all become extremely familiar with, and I would be shocked if you are somebody who is currently watching this presentation and you have not heard these names. They've almost become ubiquitous in our lives to a certain extent. However, the thing about these names is they're not humans' names, they're voice assistants' names. In fact, they're just computers, machines that sound and act human. And to say that these four computer voices have impacted our lives over the last decade specifically would be an incredible understatement. And voice technology itself, as I'll dive into a bit here, has been around for decades at least. But for those of us who are familiar with it in the current state that it's in now with some of these different voice assistants, it's only really been within the last 5-10 years. And what's even more interesting is voice assistants have really stolen our hearts and minds. Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, and Bixby have all kind of in their own way worked and weaved themselves into the fabric of our daily lives and our daily activities. Now, how do I know this? Well, not just because I work in the technology, but millions of people have let them into their homes, myself included. And I would almost place a bet that you watching this right now probably have an Amazon Echo, a Google Home, or some type of other voice-enabled device that may contain Bixby. If you have an iPhone, you have Siri. So they've been able to really weave themselves into our lives very easily. Children ask Alexa to play games. Grandparents ask Google Assistant about the weather, and everyone else in between asks these voice assistants to do a variety of different things. We all use them. And they each have evolved really into their own pseudo-personalities in their own right, which is incredibly fascinating. But they really have embedded themselves into the daily fabric of our lives. And in fact, it's gotten to the point now where we're even starting to poke fun at what life must have been like before something like Alexa. And I think this commercial here that was from the Super Bowl does that some real solid justice. Let's take a quick look.
Baby! Coming! Alexa, turn down the thermostat.
Okay, turning down thermostat.
Ready. Here we go. What do you think people did before Alexa?
Alexa, turn the temperature down 2 degrees. Thank you, dear.
Alexa, tell me a joke.
Jokes. God, you think I know loads? Look at me.
Next.
News! Get your news here!
Alex, what's today's news?
Doesn't matter, it's all fake.
Al, play that song I like. Al, next song.
Alexei, tell us something interesting.
Okay, the earth is flat and a witch stole his pants.
Alexa, miss, send this message to Prince Constantine.
Alicia, remind me to delete those tapes.
Yes, Mr. President. I ain't deleting.
Yeah, I don't know what people did before Alexa. Alexa, play my favorite song.
Now, albeit again that's an incredibly witty commercial that Amazon put together. It's kind of true though. We've gotten to that point with voice technology, specifically something like Alexa, where it's almost hard to remember a time before we didn't have Alexa, almost like the smartphone, almost like the internet, the personal computer, all these different technologies. But aside from just being able to be witty about it and imagine what life must have been like before Alexa, voice has also weaved its way into our lives in a different way. In fact, it helps some of us to remember what it means to love somebody else, and I think Google did a really good job at this with this ad that they put together here. Let's take a look.
Hey Google, show me photos of me and Loretta. Remember? Loretta hated my mustache. Remember? Loretta loved going to Alaska and scallops. Show me photos from our anniversary. Remember? She always snorted when she laughed. Play our favorite movie. Remember? I'm the luckiest man in the world. Come on, boy.
Now, if that doesn't give you chills, I don't know what will. But I think that's a really solid example at showing how voice assistant technology, in this case specifically Google Assistant, is starting to transcend just the basics. It's evolving into an assistive technology that really helps to ground us and remind us of what's important. And the purpose of any type of new innovative technology, I think at its core, is the human outcome. And that's exactly where we're headed with voice. Which leads me to, voice truly is a life-changing technology. And I say life-changing because true life-changing technology only comes around every so often. Even though we look at the last few decades and it seems like it's happened quite a bit within a short period of time, really each instance is quite spread out when you really start looking into the nitty-gritty of all of it. So voice really is one of those game-changing technologies that is going to be with us for the rest of time. Now, if we look at some of these different life-changing technologies that we've had over the past couple of decades, the 1980s, we've had the personal computer. 1990s, of course, the internet and the World Wide Web. The 2000s, smartphones. The 2010s was social media. And now the 2020s, the only logical next step is going to be voice, and specifically voice infused with artificial intelligence, because AI is what powers voice assistant technology. So this is just the next step as we've been on this consistent journey to continue innovating, understanding our own intelligence, and creating almost a spin-off of that with the machines that we've been able to build in all of these different capacities. But before I dive a bit deeper into voice technology itself, no matter the talk that I give, I always like to touch on what exactly is artificial intelligence. Because in order to understand voice, you need to understand AI and where we're at with it. And I think especially in the marketing community, we've heard the term artificial intelligence, AI, tossed around so much over the last couple of years that I think it's become one of those buzzwords that now is just completely over people's heads. And the day-to-day marketers, maybe like yourself, don't even want to think about it because you think it's this big, ominous, impossible thing. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not. It's not at all. And I'm going to break it down for you here real quick. So the only thing that you need to know about artificial intelligence to get you by in any conversation and help prep you for the next normal that we're heading into is AI is composed of 4 primary components. And those 4 primary components include machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, and natural language processing. So let's break each one of those down quick. So machine learning is something that I'm sure you've heard of over the last few years, and machine learning is simply a computer's ability to recognize patterns within data. So if we look at something like Facebook, for example, Facebook deploys machine learning to understand the different types of posts that you choose to view and the people you interact with, and learns from that and prioritizes what you see. It's a very high-level, simple example of machine learning. The second part of this is something called deep learning. Now, deep learning, we're kind of going a couple of steps as it's to its namesake deeper into machine learning. We're actually layering, when we do deep learning, a set of different machine learning algorithms, a set of individual machine learning algorithms on top of one another. And then when you start doing that, a computer is then able to sift through and analyze and process data even quicker than it can in machine learning and assign context to it and begin to understand it almost like a human being would. That's deep learning. And deep learning functions using the third component of artificial intelligence known as a neural network. So think of a neural network as the human brain, where our brain has all these different neurons firing back and forth, talking with one another to really produce our intelligence. And we've been able to artificially do this using neural networks where we have all these individual nodes, as they are called, that essentially are sifting through information and firing with one another to create logical reasoning and interpret data. So that is what a neural network is, and that plays very much into deep learning. Without neural networks, we would not have deep learning as it is today. And then the fourth component that you need to know is something called natural language processing. And that is essentially voice assistant technology. So whenever you interact with Alexa, with Google Assistant, Siri, Bixby, that is artificial intelligence at its finest and natural language processing. A computer understanding what we're saying or taking what we're saying, converting that into text, putting that into an AI service like Alexa or Google Assistant to interpret, assigning context to it, and then turning that text back into speech, all happening in real time. So those are really the only 4 primary components that you need to understand about artificial intelligence at this point. Now, a lot of people are also confused about where we're at with AI in 2020. Well, I am here to tell you that AI is nowhere near close to being able to think on its own. We are so far away from actually producing the type of intelligence that you or I have in a machine. It's crazy. There's a lot of theories out there that will get there maybe in the next couple of decades, maybe in the next 100 years, maybe even never. Nobody really knows for sure, but we're nowhere close for being sentient and thinking on its own. All AI can do right now is one thing incredibly well, and it requires a lot of training data and a lot of data in general in order to get it to do one thing very well. And that's the difference between these 2 different camps of artificial intelligence known as narrow artificial intelligence, which is where we're at now, where we can do very narrow and specific things with it. And then we have artificial general intelligence. That is what the entire AI industry is working towards. That is when we have an artificial intelligence that can actually think on its own and obtain data and learn from it without human intervention. And all of this is being driven by a lot of these other technologies that you've probably been working with and reading up on, those being Internet of Things, cloud computing, and combining all of those together really helps move the needle in terms of AI development, because AI needs a lot of data. So when we start having all these different devices collecting data, then putting that in consolidated locations with cloud computing and services like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure, it's a lot easier to start generating some of these different artificial intelligence models and really start creating this. So that's a high-level overview of artificial intelligence. Hopefully I didn't bore you to tears there, but hopefully that'll make you look beyond the buzzword. So now let's start getting into voice specifically here. So what exactly is voice? Well, voice or voice first is any interaction that allows you to control technology using natural language as the primary input. So like I said, voice technology has been around for a few decades, but it's really only been within the last 5 years or so that the technology has seen massive growth globally. And the technology functions using a facet of AI known as natural language processing, which we just talked about. So essentially, when activated, the voice assistant takes in the spoken language, converts that to text, sends it to the platform's cloud database, that being Alexa, Google Assistant, the Bixby service Siri, pulls the result, that converts the text back to speech, and that entire process happens instantly. And the key thing to remember here about voice is the interface is only with your voice, nothing else. There are some visual technologies out there that incorporate voice and visual, but in the context of what we're talking about today, it is voice only. And like I mentioned earlier, they've quickly embedded themselves into our daily lives through all of these different services. And currently there's a lot of chatter in the voice community that it may be the last interface. We've constantly been evolving our technology to these different interfaces. Well, how much deeper can you go beyond voice? Maybe the Neuralink that Elon Musk is talking about, but until I actually see that happen, I'm not going to believe it. So who are the key players that you need to know about in voice technology? Well, we have, of course, Amazon with Alexa that has been around since 2014. Very, very popular in the United States. And we have Google with Google Assistant that was launched in 2016. And Google Assistant is actually more popular globally than it is within the US. And frankly, that's just because Google Assistant can understand more languages and dialects. And lastly, we have Samsung Bixby that really started launching here in 2017, 2018, 2019 is really when it started to gain some traction. And that is specific, of course, to Samsung devices. The only reason I don't have Apple up here is because we're still kind of waiting to see what Apple's going to do, because they've kind of been waiting in the wings with Siri for quite some time. So hopefully I'll be able to add them to this chart. But for now, it is really these three key players that you need to be familiar with. So why does voice technology matter? Well, first and foremost, voice is being adopted rapidly. This is one of the quickest adopted technologies in human history. There's this chart that I used to show that showed the different trend lines of adoption from different technologies, the radio, the television, smartphones, the internet. And in less than 5 years, voice reached more than 50% of the US adult market. So it is being adopted insanely quickly all over the world. And part of the reason it is being adopted so quickly is because it's cross-generational. It's not siloed to a younger generation, to an older generation, or a middle generation. Anybody can use it because, for the most part, we all know how to talk. Every human being does, from around the age of 1 to 2, all the way until the day we die. So it's cross-generational, and there's no siloing of the technology like we've seen in the past. Again, it's also easy to use. There is no simpler form of communication than speaking. It allows us to get our points across and interact with other human beings the most efficient way possible. And voice can solve problems in seconds, unlike some of the other technologies we have, like personal computers and smartphones and some different things where it still takes a degree of effort and time to get a result. You can use your voice with a voice assistant and get a problem solved in a matter of seconds. And that's truly incredible. So these are the key things as to why voice matters, and it'll more than likely continue to stay this way for the foreseeable future. Now, what does this look like in terms of people adopting the technology, how marketers view it, yada yada? Well, this most recent chart that came out from VoiceBot.ai, which is one of the most well-known, they publish a lot of research within the voice space, at least if you're working in the voice industry, you're familiar with who they are. But every year they come out with the U.S. Adult Smart Speaker install base. And as we can see here, in January 2018, there were 47.3 million U.S. adults with a smart speaker. And then in January 2019, there was 66.4 million, which was 40% one-year growth, which is amazing. That's incredible to see that. And then January 2020, 87.7 million U.S. adults have a smart speaker, 32% growth, a bit less than the year before. That's 87 million people. 87 million people in the United States own some type of voice-enabled smart speaker, which is really incredible. So the argument that people are adopting this is clear. You cannot argue against that. People are adopting this technology, and that alone holds a huge weight to itself. Now, voice assistant importance as a market channel. So this is something, again, that more brands, more marketers are starting to look at as it evolves. So again, another chart here from VoiceBot from June of last year, and 37.6% of marketers significantly saw voice as a potential market channel. Then 25.2% extremely, very few not at all. So people see the opportunity here. I think the holdback is nobody knows how to deploy it right. Nobody really knows what to do with it. And of course we see that with all new technology, and this one is especially different because it's voice-based. It's nothing we've had to encounter before. So I think that's where the real struggle is, and it's something that I'm encountering a lot with the different clients and the different customers that we've been working with. But one important thing to note here as well is the pandemic really has moved things along in terms of people using their voice assistants. So you can see in this recent NPR Edison Smart Audio report, they did a survey here between December 31st, 2019 and January 5th, 2020 to analyze how often people were using voice commands for their voice-operated assistants. And we can see here, of course, several times per day, 20%, at least once per day, 26%, at least once per week, 25%. Now, between March 31st to April 1st, which is, of course, about a 1 week's time or so, but really kind of at the heart of the pandemic here in the United States, that number several times per day jumped up to 25%. At least once per day jumped up to 27%. And at least once per week declined a bit, but people were using it more within a given day versus in more siloed experiences like they had before. So even though these numbers may not look so huge on the front, when you consider the amount of people that own these speakers, that's a large amount of people who are starting to use these more and experiment with them, because people have been trapped in their homes. People have been confined and looking for different ways to interact with technology and solve problems quite quickly. So what is the opportunity here for marketers? Well, really, I'm going to be honest, in the post-pandemic world that we're going to be entering into, these opportunities are only going to become even more critical, the ones that I'm going to dive into here. So here are the key opportunities for marketers in 2020. First and foremost, voice technology is language-based. There is no learning curve. Almost everyone can use it, and it is the quickest and simplest form of communication. Again, we look at different technologies that have come to the forefront here over the last couple of decades, and there has always been a learning curve. Whether you're a consumer just trying to use it, whether you're somebody in marketing, or whether you're somebody in business trying to figure it out, there's always been a learning curve. With voice, there is no learning curve because we all know how to talk. And for the first time ever, the technology is having to adapt to us versus us having to adapt to the technology, which by all means should allow you to deploy this much more quickly because there is no learning curve. Second, voice is contactless and you can multitask with it. So contactless is going to be huge moving forward, especially in the post-pandemic world where anytime we're in public, we are now just getting to the point where people are going to want to do things and already are more without having to touch anything, without having to tap a screen that other people have touched, without having to maybe pay with cash or even a debit or credit card. They want contactless means of doing something when they're out in public, and voice does that because voice is completely contactless. You don't have to touch anything. It's all verbal and auditory. Again, no touching, tapping, swiping, clicking to get a result, just completely on demand, extremely simple, completely contactless. And then we look at the multitasking aspect of that, and voice accommodates multitasking better than any other piece of technology today. Because when you think about some of the other technologies we use, like a computer or a smartphone, we have to be focused and ingrained in the moment with what we're doing. It's very hard to focus on other things at the same time. Well, when we see voice, it is insanely easy to multitask because you could be typing on your computer, you could be using your phone, and you could just holler over to Alexa or Google to do something for you, ask a question, check the weather, schedule something in your calendar, be in your kitchen, ask for a recipe, all these different things. It's so easy to do, and it really embraces multitasking, which more and more people are shifting towards. Situational problem solving. So voice solves problems and situations really, really well. And this is a bit of a different problem solving than a lot of brands have had to do because there's always been a lot of back-end marketing that, and people have had to take an extra step to purchase a product, purchase a service, that type of stuff. With voice, you're voice is acting as the information delivery channel, and you're able to solve somebody's problem in a given situation on demand within a matter of seconds. And by doing so, you're building brand loyalty, you're creating customer engagement, you're solving their problem, which in turn will resonate when it comes time for them to start buying your products or service. Then, of course, we have personalized experiences. So voice assistants are constantly learning from us when we interact with them. And voice allows marketers to really hone in on what customers want instead of guessing what they need. And it really offers a one-to-one engagement and real-time feedback and obtaining data and contextual understanding of language that we've never had before. So it's going to allow marketers to really personalize experiences unlike anything that we've seen before with a lot of the different tools that we've had. And then, of course, last but not least here, voice search. So more than 250 billion web searches will be voice searches in 2020, which is a huge number. So something to pay attention to. You can own voice search for the first time in your niche or industry because there's no search engine results page. You get one shot, and if you're the best at putting yourself at the top of a voice search result consistently, you will own that information, which is incredible. And of course, it can be combined with existing content and SEO strategies and best practices, so you can really have a solid SEO strategy and be found in search. But the most crucial part is becoming a part of the voice web, which is that ecosystem of all the different Alexa skills and Google Actions and third-party voice apps that make you more discoverable on voice. So how do you get started? And this is probably, of course, the biggest thing that I come across when we start talking with people, because everybody drums it up in their own heads and they don't know where to go. Well, that's why we put together a roadmap to really outline the process for deploying voice. And I will start this off by saying it has to solve a problem. If you are not solving a problem with voice technology, there is no sense in deploying it and wasting your precious time, money, and resources. So first and foremost is discover. Dive into what your problems are. Listen to your customers. Analyze any internal things that are going on with your employees, and really just sit down and dig in and do some research and discover what are some ways that we could offload what we're doing to voice assistant technology, and strategize and critically think about that. The next step is design. So maybe it makes sense to design an Alexa skill that you deploy internally. Maybe it makes sense to partner with a third-party voice app provider like Nuance or Cobalt or some of the other ones out there to design something more IP and personalized to you. Maybe it makes sense to do a Google action. But the next step then is to design and analyze how you can develop something that is voice-based, a voice app, to solve that problem. Then, of course, it comes to launch. So making sure you have a solid marketing strategy behind what you're launching. Like with any product or service, you want to make sure people know about it and they can use it. So making sure you launch that appropriately is key. And then analyzing, is this working? Is it not working? What data are we getting? Analyzing those insights, analyzing the customer data. The new pieces of data that you have access to are going to be incredibly crucial. So this is your basic roadmap to get started with voice. Now, what are some examples that I can quickly share with you here that we've done? Well, one of the big ones that stand out to me is we developed an Alexa skill for an organization called Disrupt Milwaukee Madison, based in Madison, and they really wanted us to turn Alexa into a co-host for their event, and we did that. So the entire night, Alexa acted as a co-host and had playful banter and was sarcastic and comedic relief with the host of the show. It was actually pretty incredible and was the first time anything like that has actually been done in the state of Wisconsin, which was really neat. But we were able to do that, and it was a really solid learning experience for us and really showed us what could be possible with the technology. Something else we're currently working on is for an organization called the Social Media Marketing Institute, based in Queensland, Australia, and we're designing them a Google action to make it easier for people to become members, offloading all the content that you would normally see on a website onto Google Assistant. So at any time, somebody could ask a question about the Social Media Marketing Institute, become a member. We're working on payment integration so people can pay directly through the Google action and just save all this time and help drive leads, help drive customer engagement for the Social Media Marketing Institute, which has arms all around the world. So, embracing the next normal, and I think this will probably be the most important piece of my talk here in this session. And I say the next normal because a lot of people have been using the term the new normal. It's not new, because there is going to be a next normal at some point. So I don't want to say new normal, we're going to say the next normal. And right now, life is the most uncertain that it has been in many decades. The world is dealing with a global pandemic, of course, and right now, as I record this, the U.S. is currently experiencing one of the most powerful and uncertain social justice movements since the 1960s. It's incredibly uncertain times that we're all dealing with right now as a species, as a collective group of people. And the reality is the old normal is gone, and we're going to be passing into the next normal where technology is going to accelerate 100 times. I think we've seen that, how quickly technology has accelerated things even in the last 2 months by a lot of companies distributing their workforce and getting onto digital networks, and companies that were paying attention to robotics and automation are now investing in that. And this is what was going to happen regardless, and I've been saying this for a long time, but it was supposed to be spread out over 15, 20 years. It got condensed into 2 months, but this is the next normal. It's all going to be driven by this innovative technology. And there's going to be winners, there's going to be losers, of course, in every situation, but the winners are going to be those who choose to adapt and embrace new technologies like voice, artificial intelligence. And that's why I'm here to start making you critically think about this and give you some workable tips that you can use so you can approach your senior leadership or anyone else above you who's a key decision maker to say, hey, here's a problem we can solve. Let's start messing with this new technology. Here's the reasons why, and go for it. And I, for one, have an extremely optimistic outlook on everything right now. You know, as grim as it may seem, we will get through this. We always do. And technology is going to allow us to achieve even greater outcomes. So really, at the end of the day, voice specifically is a technology that is going to be a part of the future. And in order to stay ahead, specifically stay competitive, it's best to start learning about it, about all these different emerging technologies, and invest in them today. Do not wait. Waiting is the worst thing that you could do in this situation. You need to adapt, you need to invest, and you need to be innovative. So, if you actually want to learn more about voice, AI, other pieces of emerging technology, we do run a weekly podcast series called The Artificial Podcast that I host. I bring in guests from all over the world who are working in AI, voice, other emerging pieces of technology. We do some solo episodes as well where we just dive into some different topics. It's a lot of fun, and we actually have grown a global audience at this point. That QR code that you see right there will take you to our podcast page at anchor.fm. So I highly encourage you to check that out if you are interested. And then, of course, connect with me. I am on all of the socials. There's my Twitter handle, LinkedIn. Just search for Nick Myers. I'm the only one with red hair that you'll find. Instagram, my email address, and of course, our website where you can learn more about us as well as receive a free copy of our roadmap that contains some more details than what I showed you today. And that QR code that you see there will actually take you to our Red Fox AI Alexa skill where you can learn more about us as well as get a digital business card for myself and our other leadership members. So with that, I would like to conclude by saying stay hungry, stay foolish. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, and have a great Social Media Strategy Summit Chicago virtual.